Hello, welcome to Loremaster's Lair. I'm your Loremaster, here today to explore the depths of the desert. We're talking about the trade hub of Katapesh, the first major trade hub connecting the continent of Gurund to the rest of the Golden Road, and where money is king. It's actually going to be like that for a while now. With the treasure vault coming out next month, I'm looking at the highest price tags for our next few videos, with this being our caravan's first stop. Though this week's video does come with a warning that Katapesh was one of the first settings we got a setting book for. So if any information I'm ever going to give is going to be outdated, it's today's. So let's see what we can find. The settlement in Katapesh began around 2,000 years ago, when the Selenite worshippers were expelled from Syrian. Here, they established two cities. The first, Senri's Bastion, and the second, the Golden City. The cities grew until the year of the Scorching Winds, 2589 AR, which more or less destroyed the Golden City. However, people would begin the process of clearing away the sands. This began a time of relative peace and growth. But also around this time was the discovery of the drug, Pesh. The discovery of which was the motivator for gnolls to take over the Golden City, renaming it Katapesh. These gnolls began raiding Senri's Bastion, leading to a series of sieges so taxing the citizens, feeling abandoned by their goddess, renamed their town Solku. It was 3725 AR when the winds of fate changed, and the mysterious group known as the Pact Masters drove the gnolls from Katapesh, taking the city for themselves. Since then, the worst that has happened was the recent major attack on Solku in 4701, leading to massive losses of lives from both sides. Now, before we get too far, let us take the time to go through our first side tangent, the part of the show where we, at Loremaster's Lair, say they don't do drugs, kids, no matter what profit you can get from selling them. That's right, it's Pesh, the very lifeblood of Katapesh, and half its name. After a year of scourging winds, cacti in the area were found growing bulbs, which experimentation showed gave a sense of euphoria, as well as worked as a pain reliever. Quickly becoming a cash crop, every city has a Pesh plant growing somewhere in its borders, and even poor farmers have one or two cacti they carefully guard. Pesh, through the refining processes, eventually forms into a white buttery substance, which is usually smoked or eaten raw, and costs about a silver a dose. Though again, don't do drugs, kids. Katapesh is mostly desert, but we have a variety of dry lands to choose from. We have the flat desert to the south. The rest has rocky flatlands, which eventually turn into the barrier mountains. To the north is a savanna, still dry enough to meet the definition of desert, which eventually gives way to the Brazen Peak Mountains. The east, at least, has sea axis, which makes it a jagged coast. The climate is mostly dry, with there being more rain in the savanna areas, and twice a year, heavy monsoon-like storms come in to give the desert just the bit of water it needs to survive. For the people of Katapesh, human ethnicities are mostly Gurundi, Kelish, and Vudrani. Dwarfs came here centuries ago to mine the barrier mountains, but to my knowledge they are not their own ethnicity, just dwarf ethnicities from elsewhere. Gnomes have been in the area since the time of ancient Assyrians' control of the land. And you can also find one of the main gnome-only cities within the area. Lizard-dwelling orcs once made Katapesh a home, and their half-orc descendants still dot the land. There are also a decent amount of half-elves in the area, but no formal elf holdings, currently at least. In the area in Ayudar, hints elves might have had a presence before Earthfall. And finally, gnolls, the hyena beast people who consider Katapesh the birthplace, and is where the traditional chaotic evil gnoll can typically be found. Going through a quick look at the faiths in the area, Abadar is one of the largest, as well as one might expect from a trade country. Cross keys hang from various merchant stalls, and almost all have a tithing box used to donate money to the church, and which no one is stupid enough to steal from. Priests also regularly check and certify scales used in trade. Rene's faithful help found the country. She has various shrines across the cities. Likewise, this land was once part of Assyrian, and therefore worshippers of Nethys scoured the desert for lost secrets. For the same reason, Pharasmids keep an eye on ancient tombs to ensure the dead stay dead. Khazra are worshipped strongly in the coastal cities of Katapesh and Okeno. And in the wild areas, worship of Rovagug and Loremaster can be found, the later especially among the gnolls. Now that we have a general outline, let's get a handle on some places. First, population centers and religious sites. Pale Mountain stands to the north among the Brazen Peaks. Standing as both the border with Assyrian as well as a gnoll hotspot. Right next to it stands the House of the Beast, one of the most famous temples to Rovagug. South is White Canyon, the second largest concentration of gnolls in the country, as well as the end of the Brazen Peaks. The Sleeping Dove sits along one of the most frequent routes to Soku, once a site of gnoll slaughter of Senrei worshippers, but now protected by Senrei. The observatory sits in the very center of Katapesh, and stands as a temple to Desna, though no one knows who built it. To the south is a temple of unknown origins which many priests visit, trying to determine who the lost temple belongs to. Moving on to some ruins and smuggler dens. In the north stands the Vargas Swamp, a 30-mile wide swamp, which has the village of Slither Cove on the edge. The city was abandoned 8 years ago when the swamp rose, and snakes and crocodiles devoured most of the townspeople. Here people also can find the quicksands known as Sokethma and the Creeping Watcher, which are mysterious statues of two jackals. Another jackal statue, while I'm on the topic, mysteriously sits in the shadow of the Brazen Peaks, but that's something I'll circle back to later. Moving on to the coast is the Den of Driftwood, home to a hidden smuggler's cove which looks like a solid stone wall from a distance. Speaking of smugglers, to the mountains to the rest of Soku is the Beehive, honeycomb tunnels which are perfectly placed for bandits to hide. Iraza is actually not that far from the Lost Temple, and is likewise abandoned. And just east of the ruins is Palace Mortalis, a giant skeleton which travelers use for shelter. Third, let's look at some landmarks. In the Brazen Mountains, one can find the painted flutes, rock forms which make music when wind blows through, as well as the Gem Basket, an area which is difficult to reach, filled with miles of untapped gemstones. Pyre's Crest is the only mountain with no goals on the surface, instead living at its base, which mysteriously that surface seems to be continuously burnt. In the southern mountains stands a line of mahia known as the Lightning Stones, known for common lightning strikes and for being considered a border of Nyx. Deep in the center of the desert, one will find Sabka, a large dried lake bed which is a source of salt. And not that far away is Floater's Pond, a saltwater oasis. Evergrowth is the southern swamp area, and filled with useful herbs. Back along the southern coast, we have the Sable Sands, a black area of sand which is always cool, and causes everyone to which causes everyone who rests there to experience paranoia. And then right on the southern border sits the trackless storm, which constantly shifts the sands of the area. Finally, let's add some mysterious landmarks. As mentioned above, we have the landmarks of the Creeping Watcher and the Crouching Jackal. But in addition, in the southern Fairy Mountains, we have Zolokot mines, abandoned mines haunted by dwarven ghosts. There's a small jungle, the Spiridon Jungle, sitting a small distance from the coast that contains the pyramids known as the Steps of the Agot King. Just south of the city of Katapesh along the coast stands 3 pyramids with no entrance, referred to as the 3 Stars. And approaching the southern border again, we have Selkalos, a mysterious headless statue which appears to be reptilian. All in all, there are plenty of places for adventurers to wander around and get into trouble. Just need to lead them there. Or get lost in the desert, I guess. But anyway, while we're transitioning from the wilds to the civilization, let's do one last look at something wild. Our second side tangent, gnolls. Gnolls are traditional enemies on tabletop, with there being recent inroads by Paizo of having some of them be good. The KO from the Marauding Expanse, specifically. But we still have plenty of sources which have the traditionally evil examples of gnolls. So let us look at the contrast these creatures have with themselves. Gnolls in general are hyena people who believe strongly in the pack and hunting together. They are characterized as lazy because of the fact that they sleep during the day and rarely build anything resembling dwellings. But in truth, they are nocturnal, and the traditional raiders do not really need to make what they can take. They act in matriarchal packs, which eventually split whenever the group becomes too large to stay in one group, with the weaker part of the group left to march on their own. Both good and evil gnolls are open to cannibalism, but the traditional depiction also has a preference to the meat of sentient creatures, and believes by devouring their foes they can gain their powers. But really, if you compare both of them, the difference I see between the traditional depiction of gnolls and the Kalo is the same as the difference between Andoran and Cheliax. One simply of alignment. But anyway, with that, let's move our focus from the surrounding areas to cities, starting with Katapesh itself. Going through the districts, we start with the oldest part, the inner city, home of the Packmasters and several monuments of old. Coming in, the first thing to catch one's eyes would be why the city was originally built here. The golden oasis found by the exiled Serenites. And right next to the source of water, we have Xandrix's Pesh Palace, the largest single provider of Pesh in the city. Because of course. Old structures here include the glass pyramids, which are home to 2 mages who mummify themselves to protect the Lair lines. We have the marble sphinx, a structure which predates the city itself. and the Screaming Obelisk, a tower covered in writings of unknown meaning. This is also the location of the College of Dimensional Studies, the single greatest school on the plains, and Elfran's Steel Restaurant, a curio store designed to feel as if it were a restaurant. Next, moving out towards the coast, is the lower city, the most densely populated part of the city, and the place where you can find what is possibly the largest bazaar in the inner sea region. And considering how soon we'll be talking about Absalom, that's saying something. First is the Council's Hall, which until recently was the estate of businessman Marcin Akep, before he got caught on tax evasion and everything was repossessed. Everything. Now it is the Council Hall where the guilds come to debate, and also the new jail. The Doomsayer Stand is a place where all who prophesize doom and gloom can have their say without getting in the way of actual business. There is also a variety of other shops in this area, including the local Curigen, carpet shops, pet shops, poison shops, brothels, and cantinas, as well as other junk right next to the Temple of Nex. And if you want something off menu, there are 2 ramps by the 2 main gates, which allow one to get up onto the walls, but also serve as perfect places to deal out of sight. Jutting out from the lower city is the docks, one of the main life veins of the city, and therefore one of the cities outside the market regularly guarded by the Zephyr Guard. One of the greatest monuments here is the giant copper statue known as the Dockside Giant, the original meaning of the trident-wielding giant lost to history. Shops one can find here include salvage companies, aquariums, bathhouses, and cantinas. Would anyone be surprised if we did not have a cantina in every district? There are 2 gates to the city, the Dawn Gate to the north and the Dusk Gate to the south. The Dawn Gate area was formed during the influx of people after the Aegis-going winds. Here is where wealthy business owners and upper middle class make their homes. The shining jewel of this district is, of course, the Immaculate Repository, the local temple of Abaddon. Other businesses in this area include armorers, horse stables, mining companies, and gambling halls. This is also the home of the Smoking Ruin, an area devastated by a door to the Plane of Fire opened for unknown reasons. The Twilight Gate is newer, being populated around the time the Packmasters took over, even if the walls around the gate have existed for millennia more. The shining star of this area, for some, is the Pathfinder Society Lodge. This is also the place where you find landmarks like the Red Pyramid, a tourist attraction whose riches have all allegedly been found, the ruined monastery, the abandoned temple of Mashu built by the gnolls when they lived here, and other notable landmarks are the Grand Alchemist Tower and the Gladiator Guild Hall. Finally, we have the areas outside the walls. To the north is the Dog Market, home to the indigent, small business owners, and gnolls. Notable places here are the Mad Dog Tavern and the Charred Meats Butcher's Shop / Corpse Peddler. To the west is the Day Stalls, a shanty town designed to sell cheap goods to arriving travelers. It is also home to a brewery, camels, and sideshows like a fortune teller and talking dogs. Finally, to the south is the Sprawl, merely a residential district for laborers who work in the city. That said, there is an inn and a repair shop. But the real southern gem is Castle Clarion, home of the Packmasters. Let's go over the Packmasters and the government quickly, shall we? These masked, vaguely humanoid creatures managed to take Katapesh with a disciplined army and airships around, what was the date? 3725 AR, seeming to have appeared from nowhere. They go about as little as possible, working hard to maintain their anonymity. And so the day-to-day is handled by a man named Hashim ibn Ziyad, a man known as the Pack Broker. They know what is going on perfectly well, of course. That is what spies and the Zephyr Guard are for. But they prefer to stick to their monthly appearances before the Council of Guilds, instead of dealing with problems themselves. Speaking of guilds, it's them who send representatives together to debate and set policies to how the city operates. So let's go through them next. First is, of course, the Apis Consortium. Cannot have a city driven by a slave trade without them making a guest appearance. We have the Carpenters Guild, which just requires fair compensation for their work. Farmers Guild, of course, operates mostly outside the city. The Fraternal Order of the Anvil is blacksmiths, armorers, and weapons masters, with the current guild head being a former adventurer. The Gladiators Guild, who only take the best of the best. The Guild of Bankers and Butchers are a loose organization, though the baker half and the butcher one are always at each other's throats. The Guild of Street Sweepers and Dung Carters, who do not have the most glamorous of jobs, but their position allows them to know a lot. The Guild of Weavers is an assortment of different guilds which came together to give themselves a decent voice. Imperial Union of Breeders, which holds the best horses, camels, and mules in the area, perhaps in the whole inner sea region. And finally, the Jewelers Guild, which is one of the richest guilds in the area. And while we are here, we also have what are referred to as the Night Stalls, where things which are legally questionable are sold and organized. You can get all your dangerous materials from the Order of Alchemists and Potion Makers, which is not to be confused with the Poison Makers Guild. Totally different. The Sword and the Shield is where you go when you need mercenaries. And the Unseen Hand is a guild whose only purpose is to undermine the peaceful system that its members do not really belong to. And one more organization that needs to be mentioned today is the Zephyr Guard, which will be our third side tangent. These are the guards of Katapesh, whose duties are to apprehend magical thieves, catch those who destroy property, and protect the elite of Katapesh, with them authorized to punish all offenders they catch in quick and painful ways. It requires a series of strenuous tests to be accepted into the fold, and just as much mental than physical. But at the end of the process, they become a warrior adept at spotting thieves, seeing through a fighting style, and easily able to disarm an opponent in every sense of the term. Moving on to other cities, Soku is the second largest city, laying by a gap in the Barrier Mountains. Its position makes it a perfect stop along many trade routes, but is also the perfect target for gnoll slavers. To fight against the gnolls is Fort Longjaw in the city's north. Directly east of Soku is the city, well, more connected to farmlands, of Commonfield, which boasts the highest concentration of pesh in the nation. South stands Bug Harbor, sitting on the edge of the Evergrowth, known for its trade of the swamp's herbs, but also of the trade of the infamous false pesh. Final Plain is one of the largest gnome cities on Galarian, though most of the houses are usually empty because of how often its residents travel. Finally, returning north to the gap in the Brazen Peaks, what was once a ruined town became a hotspot for those who want to search the catacombs for treasure. And one last city to mention, though it is only nominally part of Katapesh. Let's go with side tangent 4. Okeno. Okeno is an island off the coast of Katapesh, and it became a popular harbor for pirates who operated in this area to hide. Eventually, an actual city was formed, and the crews all came together for a single purpose: the slave trade. The Okeno slavers are one of the scariest pirate fleets this side of the Grund, and constant enemies of Andoran. It used to be that the slave trader general used to also be in charge of the city, but for the last 200 years, the place has had an actual mayor to run things neutrally between the different slave crews. Basically, if you're in the area, avoid all ships flying yellow flags. And that brings us to the end of one of the major trade harbors in the Inner Sea region. However, with Treasure Vaults coming out next month, it is only going to be the first of 3. Especially since I have had time to thoroughly prepare for an Absalon video. Be prepared. It's going to likely be the first 30 minutes or so video in a while. But either way, see you then.